Hello, I'm Dr. Richard Mattison, President at S&P Global Sustainable One. It is my absolute pleasure to be joining the SINA Finance 2022 ESG Global Leaders Summit. I'd like to open with a look back. Over the past 2 years, we have lived through a global pandemic, which has highlighted how we can mobilize in the face of a global crisis. It has also totally transformed our thinking about how best to work and live. More recently, the invasion of Ukraine has shown us that conflicts can arise at any moment. For those who allocate capital and analyze sustainability, it is clear that the world is becoming ever more interconnected and that risks and opportunities are often so systemic. And the world of ESG has changed, grown, and evolved. I'm sure many of us remember moments over the years when we thought that climate risk analysis and ESG had become mainstream, and today we can say with certainty that this is a fact. The drive towards a net zero outcome for the world is the zeitgeist of this decade. In fact, the global economic transition to an equitable net zero and sustainable future is both one of the most pressing challenges and greatest responsibilities we have in front of us as a society today. 128 countries have declared net zero targets so far, and we can also say that the private sector is responding. More than 5,000 companies have published long-term net zero targets. And critically, more than $130 trillion of private capital is now committed to support the economic transition to net zero through the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, of which S&P Global is a member. Focusing on China, we can see the increase in engagement with ESG. In the first 3 quarters of 2021, the number of ESG public funds surged in China, with 48 new ESG products being released, close to the total of the previous 5 years. As of September 2021, the total assets under management of ESG public funds jumped to nearly 250 renminbi, which is $39.3 billion, almost double the size of the same period of the year earlier. However, there is more to do. Earlier this year, S&P Global Sustainable One analyzed the published targets of the S&P 1200 companies, which are the largest 1,200 public companies across 31 countries and accounting for 70% of global market capitalization. We found that the current targeted reductions of the emissions of the S&P 1200 actually fall 65% short of a net zero pathway. So we should definitely focus on ensuring that we are establishing the right ambition to address climate risks and making progress against these long-term commitments. As we transition to a net zero, zero carbon future, we have many aspects of growth and development to balance, and we will have significant trade-offs to consider. And this, I would argue, is precisely why we need ESG intelligence. At S&P Global, we believe ESG has 2 principal components of analysis: risk and impact. Let me start with risk. Clearly, analyzing financial risk is critical if we are to allocate capital efficiently. And you would expect S&P Global to have a wealth of information on financial risk, and this is no different for our ESG intelligence. We highlight areas where there are key financial risks related to ESG issues for the entities we analyze. For example, on climate, we have estimated the financial impact of the physical impacts of climate change on asset valuations in a very granular way. However, an ESG score or rating does not support the basic principles of ESG investing if it only considers risk. It is critically important to measure a company's impact on society and the environment, in addition to assessing near-term financial risk. Otherwise, we will not be driving real-world impact alongside reducing financial risk. Our ESG intelligence assesses a range of impact information from sustainable agriculture practices to labor practices to diversity and inclusion. We publish our S&P Global ESG score methodology on our website, including the rationale for our questions, the format, background information, and the weights. Through the S&P Global Corporate Sustainability Assessment, or CSA for short, over 2,200 companies engage with us to provide in-depth information on ESG, and we cross-check, validate, and standardize our ESG and climate intelligence with the 11,000 plus companies that we assess. We consider and measure performance against risk and impact metrics. We believe strongly that financial markets can be a powerful force for good, and that transparent and rigorous ESG scoring is an essential tool for market participants to evaluate and optimize their societal impact. It will be impossible for ESG to support progress on sustainability goals if measuring impact is not an integral part of an ESG assessment. We also think that the only way to ensure an effective and efficient transition to a net zero economy by 2050 or 2060 is to ensure that we take account of all aspects of ESG and sustainability. The transition to a zero carbon future is going to be difficult and essential, but it must be balanced with other economic and societal imperatives. Let me take a specific example. Hydropower has a key role to play in the energy transition, especially in certain countries. But if we were only to consider a climate objective, we would proceed with funding all economically viable hydro projects as fast as possible. However, this comes with trade-offs, such as displaced communities, the loss of valuable cultural heritage, and often a significant loss of nature and biodiversity. So we have to find the optimal balance. To do this, we need a broader set of intelligence than just climate risk. We need to understand ESG in its broadest context and take into account the twin pillars of financial risk and societal impact. ESG, with all elements of ESG put together, the E, S, and G, are dependent and linked. They are essential to achieving our common goal of a sustainable future. This is the reason why we at S&P Global work so hard at improving our approach to ESG. We believe it is critical to a transition to a zero carbon, fairer, and more sustainable world. All three pillars of ESG need to work together to inform investors, corporates, and governments in their decision-making and accelerate progress towards a net zero, equitable, and sustainable future. Let's work on making sure that a net zero, fair, equitable, and sustainable future is a destination rather than an ambition.